Right now we have CBS News correspondent Errol Barnett is there in Atlanta. Errol, I think, a lot of the things that he's talked about, he's said many times, giving himself credit for Neil Gorsuch's approval by Congress, etc. But I have a feeling that one of the headlines tomorrow is going to be him calling Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas again. What was the reaction in the crowd when that happened?
Well, this is a very Trump-friendly audience, Trump-friendly territory, and the president knew that coming here today. It's a big reason of why he wanted to break with tradition and be the first sitting president to address the NRA in 34 years since Ronald Reagan, because in many ways the president feels that the people here, the members, are responsible partially for his election win. And when you saw the president come out, it sounded like he just does what he usually do. He wants to reminisce about election night, about how so many people said he couldn't do it. And to that extent, he then did allude to Senator Elizabeth Warren as Pocahontas. For the people in this audience, though, Don, they have Make America Great Again hats. They are staunch Donald Trump supporters, and much of that is by design. The NRA itself, as a business lobby for gun owners and gun manufacturers, spent $30 million during the election to not just support now President Trump, but to also put together attack ads against the Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton. The NRA truly does frame the gun ownership issue as this organization and gun ownership equals freedom, and any Democratic-supported efforts to limit that freedom whatsoever is an attack on the Second Amendment. So for the audience here, they welcomed the president's use of those nicknames. They also chanted, one of his biggest applause lines was to build a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border, although I do not remember him saying this time that Mexico would pay for it. So perhaps the president is dialing down some of his rhetoric, but he, at a time that he feels confined in the presidency by federal judges who have limited his travel ban and his efforts to recoup funds, federal funds to cities, so-called sanctuary cities, being held up by judges. And of course, you've had Republicans in Congress who haven't been able to agree on a method to repeal and replace Obamacare. The president is looking for some wins as we approach his 100th day. Not a lot of specifics other than, as you mentioned, the nomination of Judge Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court. But for people in this room, this was an effort to give them a figurative wet, sloppy kiss and say thank you for getting me into the White House, and to try and maintain that base of support as he looks beyond his first 100 days.
Well, he has already shown his appreciation to the NRA. He signed an executive order to unwind the Obama-era gun restrictions. He put NRA President Wayne LaPierre at his side numerous times. And he also, both of his sons, Eric and Don, are avid hunters. So it's a comfortable place for him to be in a relationship with the NRA.
It is, and what's interesting, we saw Donald Trump Jr. here at this annual event. I asked some of the attendees about Donald Trump, at the time he was a real estate mogul in the 90s, supporting legislation that banned the use of assault weapons. That was signed into law by President Bill Clinton. Donald Trump supported that legislation in the 90s. While he was running for president, he distanced himself from that position. A lot of the NRA members here are willing to see a president whose views evolve over time, so long as those views end in line with their very pro-gun, anti-restriction laws. I will tell you what's interesting is the president will head from here a few miles north to Georgia's 6th district, where there will be a special election in June. He began his speech by throwing his support behind Karen Handel, the Republican nominee who was being challenged by a Democrat, John Ossoff. He made a plea and a call for people to go out and vote for the Republican nominee, but he did not mention one of the most controversial gun rights issues in this state right now, which is an open carry law, which has already been signed by the state legislature. It's awaiting the Republican governor's signature, but it would essentially allow you, if you have a permit, to carry your gun on campus, to schools, to churches, and to bars. That is unnerving a lot of moderates in this state, and there is a debate over how far those laws should go. The NRA is pushing for open carry state laws to essentially be transferable nationwide. Right now, some states have agreements between states, but the NRA wants a nationwide open carry law so that what's permitted in Florida or Georgia would still be permitted in New York or California. The president made no reference to open carry laws. It was just an appeal, those general appeals to the Second Amendment. So we'll see. There was a recent study by CBS News which found that the country, 54% of Americans actually support more strict rules on gun ownership, while those within inside the NRA are supportive of how Donald Trump has handled gun laws so far. So he's here to get a big pat on the back, and as I say, give a figurative, wet kiss to his supporters. But we'll see where this goes from here. This is a very supportive crowd, though.
Well, there have been a couple pieces of legislation in various states also that are NRA sponsored and encouraging open carry on campuses, on college campuses, and even K through 12 schools. Many of those are either facing a considerable amount of opposition, they're down in the polls, or they've already been defeated. The irony, of course, is that the supporters of those particular open carry laws are fine with guns on campus, but the Secret Service banned the members of the NRA from bringing guns to their own convention because the president was there. There's a little bit of irony in that.
Well, what's interesting is it's almost the difficult situation of what to do once you've won. At the beginning of the president's speech, or before he came out, we were watching what seemed as if it was the NRA's best hits from the 2016 election. The attack ads against Hillary Clinton were being replayed more so than you saw positive ads for the current president. And so the question now becomes, when the NRA seem to be on the outside, and that's very much how they characterize themselves, they say they are under threat by liberal activists who want to take away your guns. Now that President Trump is in the White House and you have Republicans in Congress, they don't essentially have anyone to blame for limiting any of the open carry laws which are happening statewide. And at the same time, Don, those statewide and local initiatives are giving Democrats at the grassroots level a boost. Many people now organizing. They're doing the same thing here in Atlanta, counter-protests throughout the weekend. So it's a difficult position for a group that is used to characterizing itself as the underdog to describe its situation when they are essentially in the White House.
The president said that this 8-year assault on the Second Amendment freedoms has come to a crashing end. Of course, President Obama often said, "I'm not out to get your guns. Quit worrying about it. They're just using that as a political tool." And now, ironically, gun sales spiked in 2016 under President Obama. Gun sales have actually declined under President Trump. So what's good for the NRA might not be good for the gun industry as a whole.
It's a very good point. I spoke to one NRA member this morning and asked about the fact that gun sales since President Trump's inauguration have actually declined. And the gentleman explained it to me as, well, we were told and we felt that the previous administration was going to take our guns away and restrict our Second Amendment right. That sense of fear doesn't necessarily exist anymore. Some of the gun manufacturers will say that there are cyclical ebbs and flows in the rate at which people purchase guns anyway, and surely it could turn around. But no, it does pose a difficult situation for an organization that thinks the solution to gun violence in schools is more guns on campus, because they represent the manufacturers of said guns. What will the organization do now? How will it characterize its very powerful PR and commercial machine now that President Trump has said from that podium that he will not restrict the Second Amendment whatsoever? So that's why I also think it's interesting. He made no mention to these open carry laws being passed in various states. The White House seems reluctant to openly state its position on those laws, rather saying they generally support the Second Amendment. But as a business lobby, which is what the NRA is, very influential, very powerful, they will be keen to do what they can to increase sales and have as many PR moments like this next to the president as it can.
All right. Well, it was an interesting speech. We got a history lesson about Paul Revere thrown in with everything else. Errol Barnett in Atlanta, thanks a lot.